Hey folks, Papa Boris here reviewing the third of 5 games in the World Leader Circuit Masters 300 First Edition. I was up against meindigits, which I have to confess I was a little bit salty about because I had just lost to Castor T, the designer of the game and the second best player in the world. So I was kind of hoping for something a little bit easier, but nope. After losing a game, I'm up against the #1 player in North America, who absolutely mopped the floor with me in my last encounter with him, so I was very nervous. He starts off by banning the Hermit and Cub, and I decide to ban the Acrobat, just like I've done. And then I decide to just go back to basics and play the Royal Guard, because I did not do well first picking the Illusionist. It just let my second opponent, or my opponent who's the second player, draft back-to-back really explosive pieces, and I couldn't recover. So I decided to just stick with what I know. meindigits decides to grab a Jailer and the Illusionist. Now, the Illusionist, it doesn't surprise me, but the Jailer was a bit of a surprising pick. It's a very strong character, but not the most explosive, so I didn't really mind it too much. I stepped out of the middle column so that the leader couldn't swap with my leader, or his Illusionist couldn't swap with my leader, or with my Royal Guard. Again, I don't mind him swapping with his own leader, but I don't want one of my pieces relegated to the sideline, and I want his leader on the edge of the board. So what do I take here? There's a few different options. I decide to just grab the Claw and stick with the boring old basics. I know that's kind of lame, but you know, it works well. You pull yourself up to the middle, then you draft another character, and you can pull that character up after you. Thought that was pretty fine. Then it's banning time. meindigits chooses to ban the Vizier. I don't know if that's just in general or because he knows specifically that I like the Vizier a lot, but I was definitely sad to see it go. For me, I think there's a very clear pick here. Because my opponent has taken the Jailer, I need to ban the Bruiser because my opponent is the next person to draft a character, and I do not want them getting a Bruiser when they've already taken the Jailer, because then in order to counter the Bruiser, I'd have to take the kind of lame Protector, and yeah, the Protector helps a bit against the Illusionist, but I'd rather just take this out of the game completely. Alright, the Jailer steps up, King steps back, and he actually doesn't go for the King-Illusionist swap. He prefers to keep the Illusionist on the edge, and I think that's fine. I mean, obviously now I can step forward with my Royal Guard to block the Illusionist, but I think it's also perfectly fair to just keep the Illusionist here and in waiting, so to speak. The more centralized the Illusionist gets, the more likely it is just to get surrounded by pieces and kind of turned off. So if you're not going for a super aggressive approach, I think this is fine. And then he grabs the Wanderer for a little bit of aggression. Now on my turn, I don't know. If I look at it now, I think it makes the most sense to just put the Royal Guard here, block the Illusionist, but do that after you've put your Claw in the middle. So Claw in the middle here, and Royal Guard here seems perfectly fine. I'm not sure what exactly I was thinking. This game has been played a little while ago. I chose a really passive line. I actually put back the Royal Guard and then pulled the Claw up. And I could have, you know, pulled the Claw up to the middle and then moved the Royal Guard. So I'm not sure why I did this. It does seem a little bit passive, and I don't think I would do that move again. So on my turn for recruiting, I decided to grab the Rider. This worked well for me in the past. It's a good aggressive character. You know, you could say, hey, your opponent has the Jailer, so maybe having 3 pieces with active abilities is not the smartest thing in the world to do, but I like the mobility, and I'm willing to work around this Jailer shutting down my pieces. Well, my opponent obviously is going to step into the pocket that I left for him to shut down both of my active characters. He then flies in with the Wanderer and steps up with the Illusionist. I do wonder why not put the Illusionist here instead, because I can't actually block this lane. There's no way, because my Royal Guard has been jailed. And then next turn, you know, if you do this, you could swap with the Wanderer and have the Wanderer fly back in somewhere else and get 2 really forward pieces. But it seems like my opponent, at least in this game, was not playing super aggressively. He's fine with just kind of keeping the Illusionist coiled in suspense and just only having the Wanderer step in. And it's fine. He's not in any danger whatsoever here. Steps his leader back to the edge of the board, and he decides to grab the Manipulator, which surprised me a little bit. I feel like I've played more games now since this was played, and I seem to undervalue the Manipulator, or perhaps more terrifying to contemplate. I'm not very good at getting the most out of the Manipulator, but other people are who are good players, and I think that's going to be a problem for me until I can catch up and learn how to use the Manipulator well. Because I just kind of see it as a discount Illusionist / Claw, and other people are maybe able to get more out of it than I am. So in any case, I was fine with the Manipulator. I didn't think it was that great. I was more worried about him grabbing the Brewmaster. Like, putting the Brewmaster in one of these 2 spots kind of justifies keeping the Illusionist back, because now you have like all kinds of different things you could do with the Illusionist. and kick it out in a bunch of different lanes, do a bunch of different swaps. So even though the manipulator in the hands of better players than me is a good piece, I felt happy that my opponent hadn't taken the Brewmaster. All right, so what I decided to do is centralize my pieces, even though it does mean putting the rider into the path of the jailer. At least the jailer can't jail everybody this way, and aesthetically, I just like having this line across the board. It feels safe, feels aggressive. It's everything I want in a situation. And then for my last pick, well, I decided not to take the Brewmaster, and I like that. I think I made a pretty good play. I think the Protector, you know, obviously it counters the Manipulator, and to a lesser extent, it counters the Illusionist. The positioning, I don't think I did right. I mean, obviously this stops the Wanderer from going here, but the Wanderer can just go here, and then my Protector can't develop normally. Also, now the Jailer can just step here, and then my Protector, if he was over here, could have come in and blocked and completed this line. I really don't know what the hell I was thinking putting the Protector over there, so I think I like this pick, especially when we see how this game goes. Not spoiling the outcome, but just, you know, however the game ended until it did, this Protector was doing some pretty good work, but I should have drafted him in a different position. Okay, so the Wanderer steps in, the Jailer steps around, the Illusionist hugs the wall, and then so does the Manipulator. This is a little interesting because when you put these pieces directly in contact with your enemy's pieces, they don't do anything, so he could have kept them back a bit, but I think it makes sense in this case because if you keep them both back, it's a bit greedy. It just allows my pieces to all step forward, and then his king is feeling a little bit of pressure. So sacrificing the utility of these pieces in exchange for giving your king some breathing room, I think, is logical in this case. And still, it's a little bit threatening. It's not exactly trivial. How do I block this threat of the Jailer checkmating me along with the Wanderer? Again, if my Protector had been here, I could just step up and be totally fine, but as it is, I really have to sweat it. So I thought for a while about what to do, and eventually I decided this line. I step up with the Rider, I step up with my leader to the Jailer, I then step over with the Claw and up with the Protector, and I leave with the Royal Guard. So my thinking here is that by summoning the Royal Guard from here to here to here, I'm kind of icing out the Wanderer a little bit. The Wanderer can of course fly over here, but then my leader can go back this way and then be running away from the Wanderer and the Jailer at the same time. I'm less scared of that than I am of the Wanderer and the Jailer coming at me from both sides. And I've got this nice conga line of pieces that can maybe go up to the enemy leader depending on what my opponent does. And I have to confess, this type of gameplay is a weakness, so my commentary on it is not going to be the best. These types of games where the opponents form walls against each other and try to get this like slow grinding advantage over each other, I'm just the worst at. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to analyze my opponent's moves correctly. But, you know, if my opponent doesn't find something super, super potent, then maybe I can just continue advancing with this conga line and try to push the leader into a corner. Okay, so I was very curious to see what my opponent would do. He decided to step down with the Wanderer, over with the Illusionist, back away with the leader, up with the Manipulator, and then just keep the Jailer where he is. So it is just kind of keeping a status quo, but giving himself a little bit of safety. And I thought for a while about what to do here, and because I do, as you know, enjoy aggression, I decided this line. I stepped back with the leader, over with the Claw, and then over with the Royal Guard, so I did like a little bit of a shifting to kind of block out the Jailer. And then I just kept the Protector where he was. So my thinking here was just with this weird little shift, I can continue moving up if my opponent puts the Illusionist out of the way, but I was gambling a little bit on psychology. Like now my opponent, of course, could just do nothing. He could just like move the Manipulator and that's it. But, or actually if he moves the Manipulator or the Illusionist, then my conga line can advance. So I just kind of felt like, well, he could just play the slow game, but people don't typically want to do that. They typically want to move their pieces, even though they're allowed to not. And I kind of figured maybe he would move one of those two pieces and I could start advancing with my Rider at the front. He swings the Wanderer underneath. He does step up with the Manipulator, steps over with the Illusionist, and then he tries to bring his leader further away to safety. So now I could advance with the Rider, but it's a little bit unclear after the leader keeps moving how I'm actually going to checkmate him. So I thought for a really long time about what to do here because, I mean, he is threatening checkmate, and I'm not making any progress. His pieces are definitely closer to my leader than my pieces are to his. There is this Wanderer here, which I'm trying to say is, well, that's invited and isolated, but I don't have anything near his leader, and even though I have like a 4-3 majority maybe, it's still not actually doing anything or making any progress. So I definitely felt like my opponent outplayed me pretty hard in the opening and had the advantage in this spot. But okay, I don't have to get checkmated. What I decide to do is I do step up with the Rider nonetheless. I step up with the Royal Guard as well, And then I stave off checkmate by, again, going up and hugging the jailer. And now my protector joins the party and is in a line with all of my troops. So this wall is pretty effective at getting rid of the illusionist and the manipulator. And it's really then only the jailer who can touch me for the time being. Now, of course, the wanderer can keep creeping in, but, that's tomorrow's problem. So I was really curious to see what my opponent would do. I wasn't very good at analyzing possible moves on his part, because coming up with my own moves in this type of a positional tussle is hard enough, and it was difficult for me to try to think of what my opponent would play. So what he does is he does come in with the Wanderer, which makes sense. It is threatening checkmate, keeps getting his leader further away from my pieces, and then he does do a little bit of defense with the Illusionist, stopping the rider from completely just riding in and being next to his leader, even though he probably could get away with it. He then steps his Manipulator down around the line, and then passes the turn. So on my turn, I decided to play pretty aggressively here. I did go in with the rider, and with the Royal Guard, so both my pieces stepped in. And then I just kind of temporarily staved off checkmate by moving my leader away from the Wanderer. I wasn't exactly sure what the hell I was doing here. Obviously, if the Wanderer comes in, it's a bit of a problem for me to avoid checkmate. But I figured in the worst case, I could summon my Royal Guard back for some defense. And hopefully just not get checkmated. Although I'm not 100% sure that this is a completely safe move. Well, what my opponent decided to do is step in with the Wanderer, and then I was kind of surprised he stepped back with the Jailer. I don't know if this is a mistake, but I do know that I was pretty glad to see it, because being able to go here is better than being forced to evade checkmate by going here. That's what I would have had to do if he had kept the Jailer in this spot. But he does now make a pretty aggressive move. So what he does is he uses the Manipulator to pull my Royal Guard off, which is very important. That means I'm no longer threatening checkmate. And then he steps up with the Illusionist and moves over with the leader. That move, by the way, that is important. If my Royal Guard had been here, with the rider here, I could, of course, checkmate him. But with the Royal Guard here, he still can't stay here, because the rider can ride in like this, and then the claw can pull up to the rider for checkmate, which, by the way, would not have been an issue if he had just kept his jailer here, preventing my claw from activating. But because he chose to move off the jailer, he had to move his king away to safety. So I checked and checked. I could not find a way to checkmate here. And this is very, very dire with the Wanderer and the Jailer kind of coming in because I casually let them. I saw only one way to save myself in this position. If you like little puzzles, how do you not get checkmated? This is a good one. Pause and try to figure out. Okay, so I'm not thrilled about this, but we have this very, pleasing aesthetic shape where the leader steps in and then all of my pieces are like 1-to-1 blocking all of his pieces, and then my leader is the one touching the Jailer. This does not feel very safe. I did not like this shape that my opponent made around my leader. It definitely felt like a problem. And I have to imagine that from this point, my opponent is just winning, because, how am I supposed to not get checkmated here? I did move my rider next to his leader because my rider wasn't really doing anything for defense, and then I called it a day and just kind of passed the turn, waiting to see what my opponent would do. Now, one thing to consider is that you could maybe just take a very slow move, just like move the Wanderer here, for example, and that's it. Now it's kind of hard for the black pieces to make a move. You are threatening checkmate. Moving the Protector doesn't stop the checkmate. And then there's no way to rotate the pieces around because you just don't have enough pieces. Whichever piece leaves its post, there's a piece coming in for checkmate. I am not 100% sure that's the correct move, but I think that looks to me really, really strong in this situation. Luckily for me, however, that isn't what my opponent did. My opponent moved the Manipulator and the Jailer and the Wanderer. And I think that he actually just missed my next play. I could be wrong, but I think in doing this, my opponent just missed my defense. So again, pause the video. It's not a super hard puzzle, but pause the video and see if you can figure out what you're supposed to do here. Okay, so the move that I think my opponent missed in making this move, moving the Manipulator and the Jailer in addition to the Wanderer, is this. I can move my claw down, move my Protector in the place of the claw, move my leader down in place of the Protector, and then move my Royal Guard here. And this would, I don't think, have been possible. Yeah, it definitely wouldn't have been possible if he had even just left the Jailer here, right? If he leaves the Jailer there, that's not a possible move. But because the Jailer exited, I can do this, and I felt way better now than I did the previous turn. Previous turn, I was like, well, I'm about to lose this game. But after this turn, I was like, okay, I got a wall between myself and my opponent's pieces again. Like, it's fine. I don't know how I'm going to win this game, but the claw is far from the jailer now. So my opponent can't, easily at least, jail my claw anymore. The protector is exactly where he needs to be. He's touching a piece on every side, so he's stopping any manipulations or illusionists. And by the way, this is one of the times when the protector really shined, because otherwise, of course, illusionists swapping the royal guard would have been checkmate. But because of the protector, I am literally not losing on my next turn. So I do think my opponent missed this. I think that moving the manipulator up to allow my claw to go forward and moving the jailer away to allow me to reform this wall, I believe, I'm really not confident in my ability to analyze these types of positions. I believe it that my opponent did make a mistake in doing this. I put my rider there because now that my claw is free, I don't want my opponent's leader going back over here. I mean, my opponent can still do this, but my opponent has to be very careful making moves like that, because if he's not careful, he can actually get checkmated, putting the leader in a spot like this. Right now, he's fine, but it's a little bit tricky. So now my opponent moves the Wanderer back down, moves the manipulator over, reforms the wall, keeps on applying pressure with the jailer, threatening checkmate from the back end, though I can just move my leader and avoid it, so I don't mind it too much. And he decides to put his leader further back into the corner, which he has to. Otherwise, he loses the game on the spot because of how he put his manipulator and illusionist. So that's totally fine. And now I thought for a bit, and I decided to do just a really obvious move. Nothing crazy. I just move my line down. Everything goes down, including the rider. It's like I did like that one weapon in Into the Breach, that the wind weapon that makes everything on the board move in the same direction. I just moved all my pieces. What is that? That'd be southwest. And it's a little bit of a boring move, but it does, I think, have an important virtue to it, which is that my opponent cannot put his leader here and stop my piece from coming around the corner there at the same time. He cannot do both things. He can do one, but he can't do both. And so I thought that that was worth making this very simple move. Yes, obviously, if I keep going down, eventually I'm going to hit a wall and this jailer will checkmate me. But the fact that my opponent's leader is pinned into this vertex and cannot get out and stop me from blocking or coming around the head of his wall at the same time, I thought was very significant in this case. Now, my opponent, on his turn, made a mistake. And, it's encouraging to know that even the #1 player of the continent, rated over 400, able to mop me with ease, is still a human being and can still make mistakes. He missed what I was just telling you, and he did both of those things. He stopped me from coming around the end of the wall, and also he put his leader there. And he cannot do both things, so that's the final puzzle of the video. What do you do here? All right, so in this situation, what you'd obviously like to do, by the way, notice my opponent actually hesitated, and it's like, no, it's fine, I can do it. And then he did it. What you'd like to do in this situation is pull down your protector, go here with your leader, summon your royal guard here, and then move the royal guard in for checkmate. But you can't, because of the jailer. But what my opponent missed is the claw. The claw can pull the royal guard off of the jailer, allowing the royal guard to use his ability. Now, it's very important that for this to work, I have to be able to put my leader here. This is what I was talking about. My opponent could put his leader here, as long as he keeps the illusionist here or here. Either one of those spaces makes this space an illegal space for my leader to be on, which prevents this move. But because he slid everything down, my leader is allowed to stand here, which means that now I simply summon the royal guard next to my leader and step in for the checkmate. So I got an upset. It was very exhilarating against a really, really strong player. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Please like and or subscribe, and I'll see you again soon. Take care.